Hi class, let me prep you for the very last part of our Builder series. And instead of showing you slides, I'm just going to go through the information that's actually already on the G-Class site because it's very well documented for this particular exercise. So what you're seeing in front of you is a little piece, a screenshot, a little bit of the Netflix site. So this is one, let's call it a show, one show from the Netflix site. And you're used to looking at stuff like this. You have an easy time moving around in it, clicking things, knowing exactly how it works. But now I want you to look at it from a very different standpoint. I want you to see this as a view into the database. Somewhere at Netflix there's a giant database of all the shows. And this screen here, specifically Adventure Time, is a view into that database. It's just a bunch of information from the database that's put on the screen. So I want you to think about there's some query, and that query brings out all the information about this one show, Adventure Time, and puts it on the screen into different parts of the screen. So if you think about it that way, each of these things is a little bit of data that's splashed onto the screen and formatted in some way. For example, the title Adventure Time is the title of the video inside of some kind of video table. And that title, Adventure Time, is selected with a query. So we say select title, for example. We find the row that has the Adventure Time video in it. We take that title and we put it at that place on the screen, and we turn it blue and we make it bold. So that's the way that screens are built. In general, that's the way that screens are built. The data is extracted out of the database, and it's merged with some sort of formatting and put on the screen. So let's think about this and let's walk through it, and I'll give you an idea of what it is that you're going to have to do for both your original work and also finally for your event system. So as I said, this is not a show, it's actually data. We're looking at formatted data. Netflix stores a ton of this data in the database, and let's call it videos. So let's take a look at what we would do to go backwards from what's on the screen here to a table. All the things on the screen, let's imagine, except cast, and I'll come to cast in a moment, everything but cast is somehow in a video table, sorry. And here let's have a look at the video table. So all I did here in this bullet list is extract all the different bits of information that are on the screen and give them a name, a title, a date, a rating, number of discs, number of episodes, short description, genre with commas between them, and stars. And notice what I did. I made a little table, ID, title, date, rating, discs, episodes, description, genre, and stars. That's all there. So of course in the real world, in Netflix, it's a much more complicated system. But the complication is exactly the kind of complication that we've been talking about in this class. Instead of, for example, typing genres with commas between them, we might create a separate genre table and link the genre table to the video table. So the complexity comes, from going from a simple one table representation of something all the way through, 10 tables or whatever it takes really in Netflix to represent this. But you have the basic idea. There's a video table. The video table contains lots of information about the video. And if it's a more complicated system, then we're going to think about it today as it includes lots of other tables that are all linked together. Okay, so there's the video table. I am going to break out one table away because it's the cast. Notice that a cast is like the actors, right? All the actors and directors. And let's go down to the cast table here. And I do want to go one step further and say that the cast here does really need to be in a separate table. And the reason that it needs to be in a separate table is because there's lots of different cast members, and I want to represent them all separately, and maybe they're going to have more than just a name. So for now, we're just going to say that each cast member has a name and it has an ID. And notice the cast member has a name, it has an ID, and it also has the ID in the video table that it's linked to. So Jeremy Shada and the rest of these guys are all linked to video ID 100, and if you look up at the top there, video ID 100 is Adventure Time. So once again, this would be way more complicated in the real world. There'd be lots more tables, and the linkages would be really, lots of different linkages between lots of different tables. But hopefully you get the idea, and hopefully after seeing it now for the third week, or excuse me, for this at least 2 weeks, if not 3, you start to get the idea that the data that we see on web pages came from a database, came from certain tables in a database, and the tables are linked together by sharing IDs. Okay, so that's sort of a little bit of a review about databases and tables. Now let's get to the part where we're going to look at this screen not as a screen but as a template. So let's look at the page layout. What I've done in this illustration is I've blanked out all the actual data and instead put in boxes that say which part of the database does each of these things come from. So notice the image, the video image is big over there. At the top is the video title, followed by the video date, by the video rating, by the video discs. Under that is the description. Under that is the cast, and we know that that cast is coming from a separate table, and it might get a lot larger if we have more and more cast members. And then we have the genre underneath that, and the stars, and those play and discs. Those are just buttons. Those aren't coming out of the database. Notice also that the word cast is not coming out of the database, and the word genre is also not coming out of the database. Those are just labels on the screen. Also, you should understand that the layout is not coming out of the database. That layout is on the screen. It's not in the database. So the whole idea here of making a screen is we combine data from the database with a layout and formatting and labels that are already in what we call the template. So you'll be doing a lot with templates next week, but I'm introducing them to you this week. And the introduction says there is such a thing as a template, and that template does everything but the data. So I'm sure you've seen templates, for example, in Word or something like that, or forms where you have a standard setup and a standard layout, and then there are blanks where you fill in the details. If it's a form, there's blanks where you type in your name and address, etc., because we don't know the name and the address, but we do know the label name and we do know the label address when we produce the form, and that's exactly what's going on here. In any template, there's layout, look and feel, formatting, all that stuff, labeling, and the only thing that's missing is the data. So the complete cycle is you fill a database full of data about whatever it is, an event or a video, etc. You use a query, the query gets that information out of the database, and then you use a template to place the data at certain points on the page. That gives you a standard look and feel, a standard layout, and a variable data set. So every video can fit into the same look and feel, but every video is going to have a different image, a different title, a different date, etc. So this is a really wonderful way that websites can get very big, work directly from a database, have a standard look and feel and layout, but not have to hard code or type in every page. All right, so let's see. Anytime I put up a simple description, you should be able to come up with some ideas about, well, how come this, when does this simple thing break? So spend a couple of minutes looking at this layout and looking at those tables and see if you can talk with your TA about places where this is not adequate, things that might happen. At what point does this template, does this look and feel and layout and labeling no longer work? Look around on Netflix, look at some different shows and see, is there a place where this would break? All right, for your original work, you'll be doing just what I did here. You'll be looking at a page, more and more complicated, newbie, apprentice, and master, and trying to detect what the database is behind the page and trying to blank out the parts of the page that are where the data goes. So let's sum it all up and review. We're just about at the end of this entire project. You created a look and feel and a layout before, but you put specific information in it, one event. Let's make it so that any event could go into your look and feel and layout. How do we do that? We store all the event information in the database. We use queries to bring the event information out of the database. And finally, we use templates to get the information that you've extracted from the database using a query and put it on the page. The template, which you're seeing here, is a blank. It has everything in it except the data. We won't worry so much about all the programming and mechanics that actually does the taking the data out of the database and putting it on the page. That's for another time. But I hope that I've intrigued you enough with this idea that you want to follow up further and you want to get the knowledge that would say exactly how do I do that. You now, at the end of this project, have a conceptual knowledge of it. I would love if everyone here went out and got an actual technical knowledge of it. Okay. Well, we'll see you next week for the final set of builders.